Hello, everybody. I hope you're enjoying the weather today. It's lovely out today in Airdrie. Hopefully, some of you can hop on. If not, no big deal. Watch this another time. If you hear me coughing like now, it's because I'm still getting over a nasty cough. So it only dawned on me during the week after doing the video last week about preparing for your period in 7 days in advance that I really should have looked at the whole month. I touched on it a little bit and some preventative measures, but I kind of just wanted to go through. Hi, Megan. Hi, Doreen. Hi, Denise. I kind of wanted to go through what happens in the cycle, just to give you a general gist. Now, I'm not going to go through the whole follicular and the luteal phase, just a general idea of what's happening in your body and how you can support it so that you have minimized your PMS symptoms, if not depleted them altogether, and had a better kind of cycle all over. So yeah, I should have done this last week, but I've been sick. My brain hasn't been working. If I cough, please excuse me. Hi, Tracy. So we're going to go through this. So if you didn't watch last week's video preparing for your period 7 days in advance, you really should, because it's very effective. Laura has been doing it, and she has messaged me twice already this week saying that she has already had so much energy that she's worked out twice each day, and her period is due in like 3 or 4 days. And this is the first time it's happened, and she's only having one meal a day because she's not hungry and not getting these ravenous PMS symptoms. And that was just from implementing what I said last week, like loads of advice in that video if you haven't watched it. So looking at this week, so looking at your menstrual cycle, provided you still are menstruating. So if you're postmenopause, this will be interesting, but it might not be relevant to you. So if you're a menstruating woman, looking at your 28 days as they go, day one being the day that you start to bleed. So what's happening across these days? So when we look at what happens, we see in the first 7 days of the cycle, that's where you're bleeding. That's where you're getting rid of your estrogen. So people don't think of it like this. We just think, well, most women obviously don't have a scientific outlook like I do, but you're bleeding for those 7 days, and you really don't want to bleed past 7 days. You want to minimize that. Keep it to a nice 5 to 7 days if you can. There are ways to do that. But during this time, you're detoxing estrogen, or you're getting rid of estrogen out of your body. And this is super, super important, not just for the whole PMS cascade that's going to follow in a few days, well, in a few weeks, but it's also super critical for breast, uterine, and colon cancer. So we want to make sure that we're managing our estrogen and getting it out of the body. And these are really how we get rid through our liver and our kidneys, and obviously through the uterus. These are very important functions, and they need to be supported. And if there's any like methylation issues that you're aware of or that maybe run in the family. So methylation is how when you take in compounds or you take in substances or foods or supplements or whatever, how they're getting used or sent or broken down properly to be used in their proper functions in the body. So if there's any issues with methylation, that functions are not working properly, excuse me, properly in your body, like fertility issues, a family history of cancer, maybe depression, schizophrenic history in the family or issues, sleep issues as well can be a sign that there's something going on with the methylation. Methylation is super important for the detoxification pathways as well. So all of this kind of put into a package means you need to pay extra attention to how you're detoxing estrogen in those first 7 days. So in those first 7 days, we're bleeding, but it also gets passed out through the colon. So you don't notice it because it's not necessarily that your poop is turning red. Any men that are listening, you could probably log off right now, but it's not that your poop is turning red. there's a blend for in that time when you do go to the bathroom, but we detoxify a lot of our estrogen through our poop. And if we're not pooping properly, we're going to have this problem of estrogen recycling happening in the body. So when our body is detoxing estrogen, and detoxification is a word that gets thrown around all the time. Your body detoxes every day. Every time you pee, every time you exhale, every time you sweat, every time you poop, you're detoxing. But so when we're looking at the period and you're detoxing that excess estrogen, you need to get that estrogen out of the body, and you definitely don't want to be recirculating it. So in order for us to get estrogen out in our poop, we have to bind to the estrogen. So we need our bacteria and fibers in our bowels to bind to the estrogen. This is called glucuronidation. It's like they tie a big brick to the estrogen so it gets put out with your poop, like it can't be recirculated because this brick is too big to go back through the cell walls. If that's a good way of explaining it. So in order to have those good binding capacities in the bowel, you have to support your bowel, which means you need to be getting some good binding foods in there. Going to sound cliche here, and really everything does because it's all interconnected. The body is one system, but your best binding foods are going to be your cruciferous veg, your green leafy veg, your cauliflower, your Brussels sprouts, your broccoli. They contain sulforaphane and other compounds that will bind even specifically more to bad estrogen, and there's many studies out there. A lot of the time that we see any sort of uterine or breast cancer in women, it's usually because there's an abundance or a dominance of bad estrogen, which is usually called, it's the 16-alpha estradiol. So that's a bad estrogen, and that contributes a lot to cancer. And that is the estrogen we want to get out of the body. So your cruciferous veg and your salad greens are very effective at binding to this bad estrogen and helping you poop it out. They're very fibrous, but they have these glucosinolates. And one of them is sulforaphane that'll bind to it and support the detoxification of the bad estrogen. You can also get high amounts of sulforaphane. Microacres are going to love me for this, and I really like them for this. So Microacres being a small sprouting company in Airdrie, they do sprouts. My favorites being broccoli sprouts and radish sprouts because those are the most effective for estrogen detoxification. But their sprouts very affordable but very effective, and people just don't understand how to use them. So if you have an issue with estrogen dominance, endometriosis, even sort of PCOS, this is very effective. You want to be adding a lot of sprouts into your day, like daily. So at least one meal a day. So if you're having a big salad at lunch, you want to put a handful of sprouts onto that as well, and you're going to get that nice glucuronidation happen in there. And binds to the bad estrogen, especially if you're on a weight loss campaign and you're trying to get rid of fat. If you're trying to get rid of fat, most of the time we get rid of fat, we exhale fat. When we lose weight, a lot of the time we exhale it, believe it or not. So we burn the fat for energy and we exhale then the leftover energy. But some of it will come out in our bowels, but if it's not bound up properly, it's going to be recycled into the body. So you have this bad estrogen constantly floating back into your body. Anyway, not to ramble on too much. So in those first 1 to 7 days, your focus is very much going to be on your sprouts, your broccoli sprouts and your radish sprouts, my favorites. Broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cruciferous veg, daikon radish, very effective. Cilantro, very, very good. Spinach, awesome. There are some supplements that can help. So if you're going to bind with all these foods to help get the estrogen out of the body, then you can take a supplement like calcium D-glucarate. So calcium D-glucarate, if you have your bound up estrogen in your bowels, calcium D-glucarate are going to be like the hands that push it out. So calcium D-glucarate, it works in your bowels. It doesn't work through the rest of the body, so it helps get stuff out of the bowel. Vitex, of course, being one of my favorites for estrogen dominance and for regulating periods. Vitex is very effective and very strong. It works at different speeds in different people, but you really have to give it a good go. And I spoke about that last week. So then when you move on to day 7 to 14, this is where you're producing progesterone. And this day 7 to 14 is very important. So pay attention, excuse me. Not many people know about what happens here. Day 7 to 14, we're producing progesterone or not producing enough progesterone and producing too much estrogen, especially those bad estrogen metabolites. So metabolites being that 16 alpha, the bad one. We want the good estrogen, which is 2 alpha. So 2 alpha estrogen is the very good estrogen that protects against inflammation, protects our brain, helps us deal with stress, helps us have good, healthy pregnancy. So we want a lot of that. But when we look at PMS and PMS symptoms, a lot of the time we don't have enough progesterone in comparison to our estrogen, so the ratios are off. And what could be inhibiting that progesterone or causing progesterone deficiency? One of the top factors that causes a progesterone deficiency is stress. And I know, again, it sounds very cliche because everyone's talking about stress now, but it's true. So when we have an abundance of stress in the body, we get what's called a cortisol steal in our body. So some of you may have heard about a tryptophan steal. Well, this is a cortisol steal happens. And when the cortisol steal, how this works. So the stress could be anything. It could be high levels of physical or mental or emotional stress. And physical, one, I see a lot of women, especially on weight loss campaigns or fat loss campaigns, they're pushing themselves to lose weight. They're stressing to lose weight. They're working out like crazy, which is elevating their stress even more, which is causing a whole cascade of problems throughout their body. When I work with women, and if you're one of my clients watching this, you know I'm not very big into high impact training. I'm not a big CrossFit person. I believe the body is supposed to last your whole life, and I don't like doing anything that's too stressful on the body because of that cascade that happens right down to your periods. So, excuse me, when we look at what's happening with the stress and the cortisol steal, we look at what we call a sex hormone tree. So it's a cascade of hormones and how they work. So at the top of the tree, you have your pregnenolone, which then gets converted into progesterone. So cholesterol first. So cholesterol comes in your diet. This is why cholesterol is so important for sex hormones. Cholesterol gets converted into pregnenolone, which then gets converted into progesterone, then into androstenedione, and then into testosterone, and then on into estradiol. So this is your sex hormone tree, how it happens throughout the whole month. But when we're under stress, we have these enzymes that come in at the top of this tree, at the top of the sex hormone tree, and they drive these hormones down a different pathway. So this is important, and I'm thinking directly of a few of you that I know this is happening to, but I don't want to call you out by name. So when we have a lot of stress in our life, we've got these enzymes that come in at the top of the sex hormone tree, and they push or they drive your pregnenolone and your progesterone down a different pathway and convert them into cortisol. So they convert them into cortisol when your body is, say, in pain or inflamed from a bad workout or a fall, or if your body's struggling or you're under some sort of stress. And that could be anything, like the physical, the mental, or the emotional stress. And emotional could be something as simple as thinking of something bad. And that obviously impacts us all on different levels. So for a lot of women, their pregnenolone and their progesterone, it gets rooted down a different pathway to cope with this constant stress all the time, which is like 95% of the women, unless you're living like a yogi on top of the bloody Himalayas. If you're anything like me and you have kids, even if you don't have kids, life is pretty stressful, but kids just make it a little bit tougher. And their demands all day and everything else that needs to be done. Just living nowadays can be very stressful. So this is affecting a lot of us, and this is affecting that part of your cycle, that 7 to 14 days where you're supposed to be producing enough progesterone so that you get the nice cascade of events, but you also have a nice ratio of progesterone to estrogen. So I'm not looking too much at estrogen dominance. So in an ideal situation where we've got a normal weighted woman, we're looking at having nice ratios of progesterone to estrogen so that she won't have a bad period or bad hormonal spikes and crashes throughout the month and bad PMS. So this part of the cycle, we're making progesterone, we want to support it and we want to direct it down the correct pathway. So here we're looking at supporting the adrenals is very, very important, especially if you're someone that does have a lot of stress in your life. We're looking at supporting the liver and the kidneys, because next up, they're on show after that kind of 14 to 28 days. Now their turn is coming up. So we want to be supporting the liver and the kidneys. So supporting the adrenals, we're looking at mitigating or managing stress a lot more. We can look at some adaptogens. We can look at making sure that there's good protocols that you can follow, or even taking a few minutes to yourself, a time out, having a nice evening routine, your baths, your walks, your reading a book, and your tea in the evening after kids. So we're looking at that for supporting the adrenals. There's also some other things we could look at, like caffeines and stuff like that, but I don't want to go there right now. We look at supporting the liver and the kidneys. So my favorites: liver, dandelion tea, milk thistle for the liver, super awesome. We look at the kidneys, what is great for the kidneys. Some of my favorites, and I'm a big tea person, raspberry leaf tea, cranberry tea, and burdock are some of my favorites. Burdock is awesome for purifying the blood. So if you have an estrogen dominance and you have a lot of estrogen swimming around your body, burdock's going to be very helpful for that. And it's just a tea, you just get it, you drink it, problem solved. Well, not problem solved, but you know what I mean. So then we make sure that the liver and the kidneys are detoxifying properly. Want to support your lymphatic system. Make sure you're getting out for your walks. Make sure you're kind of dancing, jumping around, do some inversion. If you can walk on your hands or stand on your head, do that. So supporting the lymphatic system is going to be very important. Body brushing can be very good here. Sauna, hot baths, very good here. Anyway, I'm going on too much, but these are going to help support that progesterone production. Making sure really stress, remember that cortisol steal. If you're concerned, so the two big players I would say are going to be making sure your nutrition is good. So in here a few weeks ago, if you type progesterone boosting foods in the search bar, I did a PDF on the best progesterone producing foods. So you're looking at your vitamin C foods, your magnesiums, your zincs, your B vitamins, where are the best place to get them. Don't take a supplement unless someone has told you that it's smart. And then even with some women, because I do have a couple, where their progesterone deficiency might be quite severe, They can go on maybe progesterone hormone replacement therapy for maybe 6 months, maybe 12 months, depending on how severe it is, while they get the rest of their lifestyle in order. So if we know that their progesterone deficiency is because they've had a lot of stress in their lives for a few years, or they've had a big traumatic event and maybe it affected their thyroid, and then of course the cortisol steal happened, they might look at hormone replacement therapy for 6 to 12 months while they get the rest of their life in order. So they start looking at their sleep, their nutrition, their movement, and of course their stress. So so we've got your 1 to 7 days. That's where we're getting the estrogen out of your body. Make sure you're having a good bleed. It's so important to bleed. Get the tissue, get the blood, get the hormones out of your body. It's an awesome reset to start the month again. Can't tell you how many times I've had girls say, oh, my period's back. I wish I never got a period. And I'm like, period is the best thing ever for telling if your body is working properly or not. It's like your own little signal to say, I'm working okay. So if your period is going well and you have a nice bleed for 5 to 7 days, that is a good sign. So welcome your period. I get concerned when my period is dysregulated or doesn't show up properly because I'm like, hold on, what's going on here? Like, what's going on with my hormones? What do I need to do to fix this? So period is super important. So 1 to 7 days, we're detoxing the estrogen, we're getting it out, making sure you've got a good healthy gut for that. So get it out, support your gut, bind to the estrogen, poop it out, let the blood flow, just enjoy those few days. Then you got day 7 to 14 is where we're kind of focusing now on building more progesterone. So look at the progesterone boosting PDF in here and really trying to focus on managing and mitigating stress at this time of your cycle so that you can prevent that cortisol steal from happening, so that you get the nice production of progesterone and you get the nice cascade of the other good hormones too. Now, while I just said good hormones, before I move on, and I know I talk a lot and I know there's a lot of information, but it's helpful. When we look at bad estrogen and estrogen dominance, so that's that 16 alpha, excuse me, estradiol, that's the bad estrogen that's associated with those cancers, that's associated with endometriosis, even insulin resistance and a whole host of other issues. When we look at that, maybe not all of that is coming from the uterus. A lot of that is coming from fat cells. Don't hate me. This is science. A lot of people get pissed off when you talk about losing body fat and body shape and this and that, and there was the plus size models, and high five to them and all, but it's not healthy. So fat cells in themselves are endocrine hormones or endocrine organs. They produce a whole host of hormones. A fat cell produces estrogen. So it produces estrogen, but it doesn't send it anywhere. It doesn't send it to your pituitary or anything like that. It says to its neighbor, here, do you want some estrogen? You have some estrogen. And that gets more estrogen, then that fat cell builds. And anyway, the cascade happens. So bad estrogen is produced in fat cells. Inflammatory hormones, cytokines, are produced in fat cells. So when we're looking at a fat loss campaign, we're looking to lose fat, we understand that even if I lost only a half a pound this week or a pound, I still lost a pound of unwanted hormones, of bad hormones that are going to cause me disease in the future when I'm older. So my girls will tell you, I don't want to hear, oh, I'm pissed off, I only lost half a pound this week. No, you lost half a pound of bad hormones that could contribute to disease and illness in the future. So it's important to look at it like that. Fat cells produce estrogen, the bad estrogen. Estrogen dominance is highly correlated with insulin resistance, which is correlated with obesity, all because of this cascade of events that happens. Like the insulin resistance causes you to gain weight. Those extra fat cells cause you to produce more estrogen hormones. The estrogen excess hormones then cause your PMS symptoms to go through the chart. Maybe you get diagnosed with endometriosis or something. Touch wood that you don't. I have wood over here. Touch wood that you don't. But that's how it works. So one of the most, okay, back to looking at your gut health. Having good gut health is going to support good hormones. Look at fatigue, look at stress. There's a lot of women dealing with a lot of life stuff going on. So understand that is going to impact your menstrual cycle. One of the most important things for women to understand is the relationship that glucose, insulin, and fat have on the hormones. So we've looked at that. Women who are holding generally more weight around their tummy, they're going to be showing signs of insulin resistance. And that needs to be addressed to help prevent any hormonal issues there. So as soon as possible, you want to address that. Generally, if I'm working with someone with like that, so here's some guidelines for you. And I believe they have insulin resistance and it needs to be addressed before things get out of control. We'll be looking at minimizing meals, more low glycemic foods, not snacking. I try to limit snacking as much as possible. So kind of treating them already like they have diabetes, even if they don't, we're looking at their meals that way to start getting control of that insulin again. So 2 big meals a day has been shown to be very helpful for women with PMS symptoms. A lot of my clients do very, very well on 2 meals a day. Those that have thyroid issues don't do so well on 2 meals a day. Also, women that struggle with weight loss, those that struggle to get those last few pounds off, we want to be looking at 2 meals a day for them. Have one around noon, maybe the next 5 to 6. Get them used to fasting, resensitizing to that insulin. Minimize their grains, gluten, some amounts of dairy, and their high sugar fruits. Also, so now this brings us then to that 14 to 28 days, so the end of your cycle. At this stage, you're starting to peak in your hormones and you're starting to feel pretty good at this stage before they start to drop down again. So from day 14 to your menses, the day that you bleed, it's in your favor. So combine this if you can, don't hate me. It's in your favor to look at restricting sugar and snacking, even though this can be the hardest time to do this. Excuse me. With my clients that really struggle with weight and PMS, that can't seem to kind of break that extra weight that they're trying to get rid of, I often find that maybe they're snacking or they're eating too often and too much. So if you look at someone that's eating too often or too much, every time they eat, they get a glucose release, they get an insulin spike, and they get an inflammatory response. If that's happening 4, 5, 6 times a day, there's many women in this state that are not metabolically burning fat. Even if they're exercising, they're still storing fat or they're maintaining because of this constant flux of insulin and inflammation all the time. So what I like to do here is those 2 big meals a day. If it works for them, like if it's agreeable, so really big, one around noon, that's good till about 5. And then another big meal in the evening, and then you're straight into your fasting until the next day. It sounds insane, but trust me, it can be done. It really can be done. I have many clients that do it, and they they do find it quite liberating or freeing than not having to worry about so much food. Obviously takes a bit of getting used to, but it can be done, and there's some ways to help make it happen. So then we are back through that 14 to 28 days. Our hormones peak. We usually feel pretty good around that third week, where our hormones are really peaking. We've got energy, we've got all these hormones making us feel good. This is where you want to make sure you're getting to the gym every day. You're being extra vigilant on your nutrition around this time, especially if you're looking for weight loss. If you know you have estrogen dominance and you need to lose some body fat, on this third week, use the hormones to your advantage. Start hitting the gym a lot more. Make sure you're getting your walks. Make sure you're getting your good nutrition. Making sure that you're getting in like your vitamin C and your krill throughout the whole month should be there for everyone. Especially vitamin C is very good at bringing up that progesterone. So vitamin C supplement is one of my basic supplements that I get all of my clients to take. We're getting 30 minutes, so I'm going to stop off now in a minute. So then as they start to drop again, now you're starting to get a bit irritable and cranky, but really you shouldn't. Like Laura, if you were doing the run up, the 7 days run up to your period in last week's video, you should still be feeling pretty good if you're doing everything well. I mean, bad periods and PMS, it's not natural. It's not a way of life. You can have a good menstrual cycle with minimal to no PMS symptoms. I have loads of my clients that sometimes their period just creeps up on them. They don't even know it's coming because you don't get those symptoms anymore. It is possible. So then when we start to bleed, we want to support this detoxification process. We also want to look at estrogen recycling, what type of estrogen metabolites are being produced. So are you producing a lot of the bad estrogen? Do you have excess body fat that you need to get rid of? Do you need to be consuming more of those sulforaphanes and cruciferous veg and your sprouts from microacres to make sure that you're pushing the estrogen down the 2-alpha pathway and not the bad 16-alpha pathway? So those are your glucosinolates in your cruciferous veg. I'm very dominant in sprouts. Again, broccoli sprouts and radish sprouts having the highest percentages. Look at sleep. Sleep is super important for detoxification. Calcium D-glucarate can help get the rest of that estrogen out of the bowels. Vitex can help regulate the sex hormone ratios throughout the month. So you'd use Vitex from day 1 to 21. So, and then you take your 7-day break and you do Vitex again. You're looking at dandelion and milk thistle tea for your liver to support that. You're looking at raspberry, burdock, and cranberry tea to help with the kidneys. I really do like hibiscus tea as well. It's really good and it's shown to be very effective for lowering cholesterol levels. So that's hibiscus tea. So all of that combined with good stress protocols. So stress, specific attention there in the first half of your cycle. Let's manage stress so that we can get enough progesterone up there. All of this combined should help you have a much nicer menstrual cycle overall while you're still having it. All of this is really effective. So implement it. Look back on last week's video. Definitely your krill, turmeric, vitamin C. Vitamin C, okay, if I had 2 supplements that I would say will help a lot, it's going to be your krill and vitamin C. Then anything else is going to be a bonus on top of that. Anyway, I've talked for quite a while. I didn't mean for this to go on so long. I hope you found it helpful. Please share with anyone that is having issues with PMS or whatever. You guys know you can add people into this group and they can take advantage of all the information too. Have a great weekend. I'm sure we will chat soon. And yeah, be safe and bye-bye.